Got the oil pump all connected, got the feed hose coming down from the oil tank connected. It's a little messy when you do that sometimes. Grommets in place. The cable coming from the throttle is back in place, and I did adjust it to make sure that that alignment mark on the pump body lines up with the mark on the pump itself at idle, which is what it is right now. And then, of course, I tightened that lock nut down. So this is now, this part of it's done. Now we're going to move on to the carburetor. Now that the carburetor's mounted, we're going to go ahead and put the fuel line back on. Pull that clip out of the way. I'm going to put a little dielectric grease on my fingers. Just coat that fuel line. It'll make it easier for the fuel line to slip through. I don't know if you can see it up here. There's a grommet right there. But that fuel line's got to go through. And this rubber on rubber or vinyl on vinyl does not always want to slide very well. So we're going to try to make it easier. Then you can wipe the excess off if you want. Put the clip back on, and then reinstall the fuel line. Put a little grease on the back side of this gasket just to make sure it sticks in place, because there's really nothing to hold it. It already had anti-seize from when I installed it a year or so ago, but the grease will just help hold it in place until I can get this cover on. That would be this cover. I think I'm going to replace that screw. I don't like the look of it. It's a little bit beat up, being taken on and off over there. So it's probably about 16 millimeter in length. 6 millimeter, I'll get one out of my inventory. Brand new 16 millimeter in length. Keep those around. Some of you probably know. Now we'll go ahead and we'll torque the side cover in place. These screws really don't need to be torqued, just tightened good and tight by hand. It's just a cover. It covers the oil pump, so you don't have to be too concerned about that, as long as the screws are tight enough. Well, most of the reassembly now is done. I still have to put the new 75W transmission oil in it, get the foot pegs back in place, put fuel in it. This has not been run yet this year. This is summer of 2021. I've not run it since last fall. Put fuel in it. I'll have to check the adjustment on the clutch because obviously I have new plates, so I might have to fiddle with the adjustment. The oil pump adjustment I think is okay, and I will put a light premix in the fuel because there'll be air now in the oil feed lines coming to the oil pump, and I'm not going to fret about that too much with an oil mix in there, 50-to-1 synthetic blend. Might smoke a little bit, but I think it'll be fine. But other than that, most of the reassembly is done. I'm not going to take you through adding transmission oil and those kind of things. It's kind of very elementary, very basic stuff. The next time you'll probably see this bike is when I'm getting ready to start it and run it, or somewhere thereabouts. It's actually a couple of days later, and what we're going to do today in this last part of this video, this third video in the series, is I'm going to start the bike. This bike has not been run in probably 9.5, 10 months since it's been run. It was stored dry, of course. I always store my bikes dry with no fuel in them at all, and I removed the battery. So I had to put the battery back in, and it's not required to run this bike with the battery, but if you don't and you start it, and you'll probably blow all your light bulbs because the battery acts as part of the buffer circuit for the charging system, and you'll blow your instrument bulbs. You might even blow your headlight if you turn it on. So even though I don't really need the battery, I did put it in just to prevent that from happening. So I'm going to start the bike for the first time since we did the work on the clutch, and first time this season actually. It's now summertime of 2021. And then I'm going to show you how I'm going to bleed the oil pump, the oil injection pump, which is right behind that cover right there. So first we'll start it, then we'll come back and I'll show you the process for bleeding. First start in 9-10 months. We're going to go ahead and I'll show you how I'm going to bleed the oil pump. I'm not going to run it too long like this without bleeding the pump, so let me reposition the camera. We'll get down close to the oil pump and we'll talk about how we're going to do that. Let me explain why I need to bleed the oil pump. I had this oil feed line coming down from the oil tank right here off the pump when I had this full side cover off. And by doing so, I introduced air into the system, so it was no longer sealed. So when I put it back together, I'm going to have air getting into the oil pump until I can purge that through and into the engine. That's why I have a premix in the fuel tank right now, because I'm going to have intermittent oiling. Now if you look at the Kawasaki service manuals, they recommend a 20-to-1 oil mix when you're doing this kind of procedure, or you're not running with an oil pump. I'm not going to run a 20-to-1 mix. I've got a 50-to-1 full synthetic oil mix in the fuel tank. I think will be plenty good. I've run 35 and 40-to-1s before, but with this high quality 51 oil mix, I'm confident we're going to have plenty of oiling. So with an oil mix in the tank, the procedure is you bring the engine up with the throttle to approximately 2,000 RPMs, and then you move this arm right here to wide open, and watch for oil in the oil line here, watch for air bubbles to get pushed through into the engine. And what you're really doing is, by opening this up all the way, you're bringing the pump stroke to maximum volume to purge the pump quicker than if you just did it through normal riding. So what I need to do here now is start the engine, and I'm going to bring it up just a little bit. in terms of RPM. I'll probably do it with the idle screw here, and then you'll see me just take this and bring this all the way up to maximum, and I'm going to watch this oil line. You might not be able to see it because the oil really is almost clear, but I will be able to see the air bubbles working their way through, and when I'm satisfied that I've got the air out of the system, then we'll button it up, put it back together, and then we'll take it out and take it for a little ride and make sure that the clutch is working the way we expect it. I think we've got the oil pump all purged of air. I don't know if you can see it on camera or not. I tried to point to it a couple of times, but I saw bubbles coming into this output line right here out of the pump, and working their way along this line right here, this oil line that goes into the engine case or cover that we just had off, and then feeds into that check valve that we replaced a year or so ago. And for about the last 10 seconds or so, give or take, I didn't see any more air bubbles, so I think we're about good. And the bike is smoking considerably, which you probably can't see in this shot, but that tells me she's getting plenty of oil. So between the 50-to-1 in the tank, and I think I've got this all purged, I think we're good to go. So I'll go ahead now and put this cover back on. We'll take the bike outside, and we'll try to do a little test ride, make sure the clutch is working the way I would expect. Well, there she is. She ran perfect. I don't even think the clutch is going to need any adjustment until maybe a little bit later on this summer. I'll ride it probably weekly just around the property here, but the clutch is butter smooth. It's shifting fine. So I think the work that we did on replacing those friction plates and new springs did the trick, and I'm very happy with the way this turned out. We're going to call this video, not only this video, but this three-part series, a wrap on this F6A Kawasaki 125, 1872 model, repairing the clutch. Again, remember, it started out with the clutch wouldn't release, and 3 videos later, here we are. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.